issues that impact the local environment. This is where we address the topics that matter. Here's your host, Kathy Miller.
Good morning. Welcome to The Buzz. I am your host, Kathy Miller. And since we rebranded The Buzz to the beginning of March, or in the beginning of March, one of the changes I wanted to have was a monthly roundtable discussion with exennials who bridge the Gen X and millennials age gap there, and millennials and Gen Z, and to hear their perspectives on a number of different matters. And if you've been listening to me over the past 11 months or so, you know that I have brought in some of those conversations into the Business Buzz, which is now The Buzz. So today we're breaking down the political landscape following nomination day, with the current 58 candidates officially declared for the 2025 general elections. What do these candidates bring to the table? Are their promises realistic? And more importantly, how will their policies impact Caymanians and residents of the Cayman Islands, the entrepreneurs, working professionals, and families shaping Cayman's future? Joining me today is a Caymanian entrepreneur here to give her take on the current political atmosphere, the promises we're hearing, and what voters should be paying attention to, plus a whole lot more. I think she's got a couple surprises for us this morning as well. So good morning to Anniki Hill.
I'll be a Brown till I die. It's okay.
Yes, I almost said Brown. That was her previous last name. And welcome to The Buzz.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to have you on this segment of the show, and I know we're going to have an amazing discussion. I want to invite listeners, if they would like to chime in, if they would like to share their thoughts or have any questions, you can call us at 1-800-534-8255, 949-8990, 949-6037, and you can WhatsApp call or message us at 925-3261. All right. I guess we're just going to get right into it. We're going to start. And the first question that I have for you today is, now that we do have a confirmed 58 candidates in the race, we did have one withdraw. What are your thoughts so far on the political landscape as we lead up to Election Day? Do you see a difference in how candidates have approached this election compared to previous ones?
So this is a loaded question, right? And I should probably start with an introduction of who I am in the political landscape. I have been an elections officer for about 20 years. I started before I was able to vote and worked in the elections office. And before I even say anything else, Cayman has one of the most effective elections offices probably in the world. It was a pleasure to work with the elections office. I know that there are a lot of complaints throughout the community about interacting with government agencies and so on. The elections office is bulletproof. I miss it, but I also am very much this kind of segues to the next piece, is that, you know, I was raised by civil servants, surrounded by civil servants all my life. So I've always been very circumspect in the way that I speak about politics. So this is my first conversation since I got my free paper, which means that my mom retired a couple of years ago. So this is my first really open conversation about the political landscape. I think it's going to be a habit of mine to be balanced and circumspect. But, you know, draw me out if you need to, Kathy, because I do have opinions. I have more than the average person, probably.
I have a feeling I don't need to draw you out so much. But I love that this is going to be your first conversation that you can freely speak, per se.
Yeah, you've really opened up the door on this one. So the political landscape and how it is different now. I think one of the things I'd like to just kind of cover is just how we got here, right? Because when I was growing up, Caymanians were very political, right? It was a much smaller population. I remember we only had something like 26,000 people when I was growing up, when I was in primary school. I remember that number for some reason as part of my social studies class, right? In like year 5 or something. And we were majority Caymanian. It was a much simpler life. Politics was also simpler, but, well, it depends on how you define it, right? We had multiple districts, and some of those districts had multiple representations. So folks in those districts had multiple votes.
Right. I remember that, yeah.
There was no constitutional foundation for political parties. And so what would happen is, the community leaders in the district would run for election, and they would then form teams, and they would form the EXCO, the Executive Council, which is now what we call the cabinet, right? And my memory of this is like, I remember probably my first political memory is going to Mr. Jim Bodden's funeral. I was in primary school at the time, and I sat at the front row with my daddy and the tents outside because not everyone could fit inside. Mr. Jim was a force. And I remember his funeral and being told as a child how important he was to our history, long before he was declared a national hero. But my perspective is very much skewed to the Bodden town and the eastern districts, because that's where I grew up.
Okay.
But I saw political campaigns designed, and I remember watching Mr. Roy Bodden be elected for the first time. I remember when Mr. Anthony Eden entered politics for the first time. I remember when McKeever won his first election, and you see this is the Zennial perspective.
Yeah.
So Gen X and millennials will remember their politicians by the way they sounded on Radio Cayman when you were listening to Parliament at night. Mr. Benson had this deep, deep, deep voice. You could always hear when Mr. Truman spoke. Like, there was a different relationship to politics. Fast forward to today.
Wait, before you get there,
Woo!
Can you give us a bit of the background as to how you remember these campaigns so much, that your personal tie to that,
Okay.
I guess.
So my dad would have started the first advertising agency in Cayman. It was Brown and Brown. It was in the Crichton building. And I remember I actually first came to Radio Cayman as a 2-year-old to do a voiceover for an ad. And he always wanted his kids to be involved in knowing their political responsibilities, knowing how sacred our vote was. Women were not permitted to vote at some point in not so distant history. People of color were not permitted to vote. So this was very important to my parents, both of them. But my dad in particular was the one that became very, very active. And he was hired to be responsible. Well, his company was hired as the messaging part of the campaign for multiple campaigns. Some of those brand new elected people that I mentioned would have had his support in their messaging to the Cayman public, and his strategic thinking on how to present themselves. And so he has a lot of claims to fame when it comes to his support for successful election campaigns. And those campaigns were actually planned out at our kitchen table. So, there were a lot of people that were in and out of our houses when I was a child, and you don't realize how much a 5-year-old listens. And then they piece it together and remember when they're 10 and 12, and now I am a Zennial. And I'm kind of like on the cusp of a Gen X and a millennial. I'm like what they called, I hate this term, but I'm going to use it, a geriatric millennial.
Oh man, yeah, I don't like that term
I
either.
hate that so much.
I don't
but
like
that's
the word
what it is.
geriatric.
Yeah, me either. It just sounds like a hospital bed.
Yeah,
It sounds like it smells like peroxide. But it's like we were born in the early 80s. And late 70s, so I would have been like 82, right? And so seeing we remember the old version of politics, and now we have been a part of this new version of politics, which involves political parties. It involves social media, which is massive. We have very different media houses with very different tones now that are presenting. And we are the messaging around politics is different, but not only that, the population is also different. We watched the status grants and the impact that they had on what our voting population looks like, and now we're seeing the impact of that in how our politicians are presenting themselves to the people. So that's like the lead up to here. What do I think is happening this election? Why? So I remember thinking, and we used to talk about this like at domino tables and stuff like that. You sit around the kitchen table and we watched the formation of the UDP, which became the CDP, I think. Something so.
I don't know. I feel like they changed their names a couple of times
Yeah.
but yeah, I remember the formation of the UDP as well.
And somebody's gonna cuss about this later, but I remember feeling like, okay, so the UDP is McKeever's party.
Yes.
And then the PPM is not McKeever's party. Right? So even when we started out with party politics, we started out with personalities, which is how Cayman politics had been. You know, we had big personalities. You know, Mr. Warren Conley. We had, you know, Mr. Jim was a big personality.
Yeah, you said he was a
He
force.
took up a lot of space. Mr. Haig Bodden had a big personality. So we had a lot of like personality politics. And I think that even the beginning of our political parties, we weren't clear on what they stood for. We were clear that this was Mr. McKeever's party and this was not Mr. McKeever's party, right? And then the PPM developed their own identity. But I feel like it still was very much wrapped up around personality. What I think is happening this election is that candidates who are independent, as well as the two parties that have been formed and the remaining party, which is the PPM, are having to show up with positions. Like, who are you really? And you're starting to see parties that are formed around positions rather than around personality. So that's kind of like the view that the transition that the political landscape has made, in my opinion.
Okay. Now, I have a question a little later that touches on the personality, but I think I'm going to scroll down and see if I can find it a little quicker. I think I'm going to hit on that right now. So how much does personality it's a big thing, right? But your personality doesn't necessarily mean that you're effective at doing certain other things, at executing certain things, right? And I have seen in the past where people have been voted in based on their popularity, per se, not on things that have been accomplished or anything that they any kind of notches on the belt type of thing. So when it comes to a candidate's personal character now, what does that mean to you when it comes to voting?
I'm gonna answer that from my own personal perspective, as well as attempt to make a representation of my generation. And I think that those are two different things.
Yes.
I acknowledge that I come from a position of privilege. I have tertiary education. I have a very established career as a professional. I have a certain amount of economic privilege. And I acknowledge that this is something that is, you know, that will influence me making decisions when I choose who to vote for. I believe that, however, our generation spans a huge spectrum. And there are a couple of places that we will see major differences. And one of them is gender. I, as a professional millennial woman, will not be voting for someone who has any stain on their character around the mistreatment of women. That is a critical point for me. Like, you don't even exist on that ballot as far as I'm concerned. And that is very, very important to me. Now, I will also judge people who don't consider that to be a priority, because there's an acknowledgement, and we're seeing this happen all over the world right now, but most obviously in the US, you're seeing changes that are happening to people's lives based on who they've chosen as leadership.
Rights taken away from women.
Rights taken away from women specifically, but not just women. We're seeing people who are in the LGBTQ community losing their rights. You're seeing a lot of things happening, right? So there are different forms of minority group, but any form of mistreatment of other human beings is going to be a disqualifier for me. But women in particular, it is one that is a trigger for me in a different way. Women and children. There is a vulnerability that women and children have naturally physically that put us in a position where if those protections are taken away and if we are not acknowledged as citizens if we are second-class citizens, then the entire country suffers, right? There have been economic studies about the impact of the rights of women on the GDP and on the productivity and the well-being of citizens of a nation. And that is one of the critical factors. It's also one of the critical factors that Mr. Roy Bodden has identified in a lot of the work that he's done on Cayman social development. If we are putting people in charge of women's affairs and women's lives, which you are when you're voting for someone, because you have no idea what ministry they have and it doesn't matter.
Right.
They're at the table where our decisions around our health, our well-being, our safety are going to be considered. if we are putting people in positions of power, we need to trust that they are not going to, first of all, abuse that power personally, but also make decisions that will lead to the abuse of power, right? So, or that will lead to the disenfranchisement or a reduction in the well-being of women and children. Children, I add to, under women, because generally speaking,
right, women and children, you always hear that together.
It's very similar vulnerability, but that's a big deal for me. No, that's me.
Well, before you go further with that,
yeah,
because I know you're going to give now your generation's kind of perspective, or what you deem for that to be your generation's perspective. Now, that was on the mistreatment of women, right? What about a candidate's either civil or criminal offenses that they may have had in the past? Does that impact my decision? Fortunately, it hasn't had to yet, based on where I've had to vote. Would it? It depends. It depends on what it is. In an ideal world, I would want to be voting for someone that I believe can represent me with decency and with decorum, with dignity, a lot of D's, and with competence. If you had some form of offense when you were 18, I don't care. Like, honestly, it depends on what it was, but generally speaking, I don't care. Yeah. Right? We make a lot of mistakes in our younger ages, growing up, becoming adult,
sometimes.
It happens.
Yeah. And I've watched, I look back now on 18-year-olds that are like coming up under me, like my classmates' kids, my cousins' kids. I'm like, oh my God. I can't wait till you're.
But if you're doing these things in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you've had
then I have
sometime
a
as an
problem.
adult. Yeah,
then I have a problem. I think our law protects us from the dishonesty piece.
Yes.
But has it? I feel like some of the people who have ended up in positions who have had criminal records cannot hold a candle to some of those with clean records in what I would consider to be dangerous to our country. Right?
I'm going to end on that note right there, because we got to go to a commercial break. We're going to come back. We're going to hear about the what you think your generation's perspective is on how much somebody's personal character means when it comes to voting.
And I'm Denise Brown of Cayman Insurance Center.
Family is not the most important thing, it's everything.
We have worked with the community and their families on protecting themselves for the future.
Whether it's providing top-rated life insurance
or protecting your family's household investment.
From our family to yours, we understand and we care.
I'm Denise Brown. Call me at 814-7229.
And I'm Michael Webster at 925-5433.
We are Cayman Insurance Center,
specializing in property, life, and other lines of insurance products and services at an affordable rate. We are Michael and
Denise at Cayman Insurance Center.
Call today.
Hey Cayman parents, we get it. You're underslept, over-trafficked, you can barely find your sanity in the morning because you're still trying to find your kids' shoes and lunch boxes. Let Yum take some of the stress away. Every day, over 3,000 students enjoy delicious, nutritious meals from Yum. Over 5 million lunches served and counting. Private school parents? Browse the Yum Cayman app and order up to a month in advance or last minute by 12 a.m. the night before. Government school students? Just drop by the Yum canteen. No pre-orders needed. Yum can't help you find your sanity, but we can sure make your mornings just a bit easier. Check out daily menus at myschoolpos.com or visit yumcayman.ky to learn more.
Cayman Brand Source Home Gallery is having an appliance inventory reduction sale with up to 50% off selected appliances and 25% off all kitchen packages until March 31st. Enjoy discounts on luxury brands like Foster, Milano, and more. Refrigerators, wine coolers, and barbecue grills are all discounted. All appliances are included in the sale. Don't miss out. Shop now at Brand Source Home Gallery, Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park, and save big before prices rise in April. Call 623-5000 for more details or visit us today and take advantage of these incredible deals. Act fast before the best items are gone. Brand Source Home Gallery, Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park. Call 623-5000. Looking for fresh, healthy food that's full of flavor? Then you've got to visit Kirk Market. Our dishes are made with fresh, high-quality ingredients. Enjoy vibrant mixed greens or satisfying pasta salads. Or try one of our delicious grill options like blackened chicken, spicy beef steak, or grilled salmon. Looking for something light and flavorful? We've got sushi rolls and poke bowls prepared daily. And don't forget to explore a hot bar or Billy Fresh salad at the salad bar. Stop by Kirk Market today for breakfast, lunch, or dinner and taste the difference. Eat well, live well with Kirk Market.
The Buzz with your host, Kathy Miller.
Welcome back to The Buzz. I am your host, Kathy Miller, and I have Anniki Hill, not Brown. It was Brown. Brown Hill.
No, Brown Hill, the image.
Joining me on The Buzz this morning, we are talking about the current political landscape after nomination day, how she's feeling. She gave a great history on her involvement so far with politics since a little kid from 2 years old and from 5 years old, the things that she remembers. And the question that I had asked before we had gone to the break was about a candidate's personal character, what it means to her when it comes to voting. And she spoke about basically the mistreatment of women and children. And then I also asked about civil or criminal offenses, if that makes a difference at all when you're looking at a candidate when it comes to voting. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on anything else before you gave your generation's perspective on this topic.
Yeah, you asked the question about the criminal record, and I still believe that my answer is true to me, right? Once again, I hesitate to answer it because I've never had to deal with it in my constituency, but it will depend on what was done. I feel like the dishonesty piece is a very important part. I also believe that physical harm to another person is critical. Like that would sway me. Like if you put your hands on another person, and I you saw a lot of stuff last term about like, dirty jokes and stuff like that. And I'm like, that to me is not as important to me as, because everyone has a different sense of humor, and let's just be honest, Caymanians have a really salty sense of humor. What we say at church and what we say at the office is not the same thing that we say at the kitchen table, right? So I have a lot of forgiveness for people making verbal missteps, but when it comes to things like dishonesty, when it comes to harm to other people, when it comes to making others feel unsafe, I draw the line.
No tolerance for that, I understand.
No tolerance for that. Now, my generation is one of those, and I actually participate in communication with my class, my graduating class from John Gray High School, and we talk a lot about these things in our group chat. Like every group, listen, the class group chats in Cayman are just hot, but and we have very diverse perspectives, right? I have diverse perspectives of the millennials in my own family, and I noticed that there's a major difference between the male approach and the female approach. And I have a lot of, it's not necessarily a morality thing so much as what are the priorities, right? And I know this is probably not answering the question. This is going into a whole other thing, but one of the things that I have heard from, my in-laws, my family members, the gentlemen in my family and the gentlemen in my generation, is that there is a erosion of what was traditional Caymanian men and their lives and their activities.
So I'm going to ask you now, what was the definition of a traditional Caymanian man?
Okay.
How would you describe it?
It's not so much a definition of the person. It's just like what they did in life, right? So a lot of them were seamen. The ones that were home, and when they were home, they would set a fish pot. And you know what I mean, right? Okay, just making sure. For those of you who are not Caymanian and don't know what a fish pot is a trap. You put a fish trap out and you tie it to a rock in an area where you think that you will catch, and it, you bait it, and you have a trap door, and You have a fish pot, you set your fish pot in the morning, you come home in the evening, you pull it up, and that's dinner, right? And that was, there were ways of feeding your family that were not dependent on a government or on a job. And I feel as though we have impacted the Caymanian man's self-identity by taking away a lot of the options for, and I understand why we've done it, but a lot of the things, the activities that were specific to Caymanian men, and we are losing certain traditions. So for instance, a sprat net, how was that made? Because those were made here. You know, Caymanian men and women would make their nets, their cast nets, right? And there would be, how do you, you know, I don't, these guys are anglers. Some of these anglers, if you see them rig for tuna, that is a nighttime job of pre-rigging your hooks. But one of the things that these guys are no longer able to do, and this is a skill that has been taken away, was to actually make a spear gun or make a Hawaiian sling. And to hunt, they would hunt with BB guns, not so much, you know, firearms, and some of them had shotguns, right? But, you know, I know why we have changed, and we do have to change, but I think the people who have been most impacted by those changes have been our men. And I believe the generation that has been most hurt by those changes have been the Gen X and the millennial men. And I'll say why. We are the generation that saw the transition from those things being normal in day-to-day life, and we had all of these things to look forward to with this being normal in our day-to-day life. And then all of a sudden you're 17 and you can't use your spear gun anymore, right in the prime of your life. And I think that a lot of those changes have had an impact on the way the Caymanian man sees politics. And I think it also has had an impact on how the Caymanian man approaches modernity. And unfortunately, it has put us in a position where the Caymanian man feels like he has to make a decision between the protection of the environment and the protection of our cultural heritage. So you're seeing a major difference between how women are approaching the environmental issues that are being raised and how men are approaching the environmental issues that are being raised, particularly as they relate to the sea.
You have so many great points. I don't even ask you any questions.
Just gonna make me talk? I'm gonna get in trouble. You gotta catch me.
No, you won't get in trouble. The only person who would be me.
Oh, bless you.
No, but you're making some great points. So to circle back, you know, to that question when we're looking at the generation and how they're coming, you know, how they take the personal character into account when it comes to voting. And you wanted to describe how you think the traditional Caymanian men have been impacted and how that's trickled into the millennials and Gen Z now.
In fact, it doesn't even impact Gen Z quite as much because Gen Z doesn't know what they're missing.
That's true.
Right?
That is true.
It's the millennial man that feels the loss of it because right as he was entering his prime, where these are the things that he was taught that were traditional, and his participation in Cayman's, his social role in Cayman has just been taken away. And you know, this really ties it down for me, right? And it's a heartbreaking conversation I had with a very good friend of mine that I grew up with. I didn't really know him very well growing up, but we became closer as adults. And I learned that his sister was graduating with her master's. I was like, oh, really? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, my other sister, the younger one, she's just finishing up her bachelor's now. I'm like, but bro, what happened to you? And you know what he said to me? I come from a typical Cayman family. The girls go to college and the men go to jail.
Whoa, how is that a typical Cayman family?
Is he wrong? In our generation, is he wrong? Like, I have visited the prison and I have been amazed by how many of my classmates are in there.
I think that's his experience.
It is.
And I think we both know quite a lot of men who that is not their experience. They're
I agree.
Super accomplished.
I agree. And don't get me wrong, this is a guy who has not been to prison. It was him drawing a contrast between how Caymanian women are and how we operate in modern Caymanian society and how displaced a young man feels in the Caymanians. He hasn't been to prison, he himself. But it's just something that he spat out thoughtlessly. And I was like...
What was your reaction to that? I mean, mine was, you blew me away right there. But.
I was speechless, right? But then I sat and I thought about it. And unfortunately, like, the reality of that is you would be shocked at how many young Caymanian men have been in prison before they turn 30.
Oh, I know a lot of them.
Right?
I know a lot of them. And it's
even
not
if it's for a
judgment for me
weekend
in that sense, but it things can happen.
Yeah. But it gives you also so I actually believe that one of the things that we are not talking enough about, and I know this is one of your questions, but some of the things that are not being handled in the forums in particular, it's been mentioned here and there, but we were a country that was built on trade.
Right.
How is our only national trade school in the prison?
We don't have there's a TVET program, right? That's a TVET program.
After you finish, there's a TVET program.
After you finish high school. I believe it is after you finish high school. I mean, I think it's expected that you're supposed to finish high school. And if
my
you don't want to go into
grandfather
the
was on a
traditional
boat
stuff-
at the age of 15.
Okay.
Making a living for his family.
At the age of 15.
15 years old. And he was not unusual. Caymanian men would fake their age to get out on the sea early so that they could start their lives and make a living. Captain Paul Hurlston. I don't know if you met Captain Paul. Captain Paul's a national treasure. I adore.
I don't think I've met him.
I mean, we only met recently, but my grandpa sailed with him. And some of the things that Caymanian men did from the time they were high school age, those are the things that they wanted to pass down in a generation.
Right.
That is now a cutoff. That is like it terrifies me to watch some of my like the young cousins, and I have a nephew. I'm watching them grow up, and I'm like, these kids are gifted with their hands from the time they are tiny. And what do they have to do with it? Like, what is out there for them to do with it? There's plumbing, there's electricity, there's a lot of the old seamen came home and built CUC. A lot of the old seamen came home and built the airport and the aviation. But there are only limited places in those two businesses, and water authority is another one, right? So the utilities and aviation are where the old seamen, their children are now working, right? Public works, maybe, right? But this was a nation that was built on skills that were so widely sought after all over the world.
Right.
They're widely sought after all over the world. I mean, to this day, Cayman's record in seafaring is unmatched, right? Talented engineers, talented port captains, and when our men stopped going to sea, and we started to limit what they could do on the sea at home, you just see this narrowing of what a Caymanian man can be. And I think that that is having a major impact on how they are seeing environmental decision making.
I think that you've hit on a lot of great points right there. We missed a commercial break. I totally didn't even notice. Paul's waving his hands at me. All right, well, we got to take a commercial break. We're going to go continue back to the conversation, kind of refocus back on that political landscape of things.
Problem.
But you had so many amazing points and have me thinking about a lot right here as well, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners.
Looking for fresh, healthy food that's full of flavor? Then you've got to visit Kirk Market. Our dishes are made with fresh, high-quality ingredients. Enjoy vibrant mixed greens or satisfying pasta salads. Or try one of our delicious grill options like blackened chicken, spicy beef steak, or grilled salmon. Looking for something light and flavorful? We've got sushi rolls and poke bowls prepared daily. And don't forget to explore a hot bar or Billy Fresh salad at the salad bar. Stop by Kirk Market today for breakfast, lunch, or dinner and taste the difference. Eat well, live well with Kirk Market.
Hey Cayman parents, we get it. You're underslept, over-trafficked, you can barely find your sanity in the morning because you're still trying to find your kids' shoes and lunch boxes. Let Yum take some of the stress away. Every day, over 3,000 students enjoy delicious, nutritious meals from Yum. Over 5 million lunches served and counting. Private school parents? Browse the Yum Cayman app and order up to a month in advance or last minute by 12 a.m. the night before. Government school students? Just drop by the Yum canteen. No pre-orders needed. Yum can't help you find your sanity, but we can sure make your mornings just a bit easier. Check out daily menus at myschoolpos.com or visit yumcayman.ky to learn more.
I'm Michael Webster.
And I'm Denise Brown of Cayman Insurance Center.
Family is not the most important thing, it's everything.
We have worked with the community and their families on protecting themselves for the future,
Whether it's providing top-rated life insurance,
or protecting your family's household investment.
from our family to yours, we understand and we care.
I'm Denise Brown. Call me at 814-7229.
And I'm Michael Webster at 925-5433.
We are Cayman Insurance Center.
Specializing in property, life, and other lines of insurance products and services at an affordable rate. We are Michael and
Denise at Cayman Insurance Center.
Call today.
The nation listens. The candidates speak. Subway presents the General Election Debates live in studio on Radio Cayman 89.9 FM and 93.9 in the Sister Islands every Monday and select Wednesdays from 7 to 10 p.m. 2 sessions. One powerful discussion. With Election Day fast approaching, hear what the candidates have to say on the cost of living, housing and development, economic growth, sustainability, education, transport, tourism, immigration, and more. Who has the vision? Who has the plan? Hear it all unfold live, unfiltered, and on the voice of the Cayman Islands. Radio Cayman 89.9 FM and 93.9. Streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Visit Radio Cayman's social media pages for debate details. Brought to you in part by Cayman Enterprise City.
Also brought to you by Reflections, UCCI, and Yum.
The Buzz with your host, Kathy Miller.
Good morning. Welcome back to The Buzz. I am your host, Kathy Miller, and in studio with me is Anniki Hill. We are talking about the political landscape as it has evolved since nomination day, with what we know as 58 candidates currently vying in the general elections 2025. Election day is Wednesday, April 30th. She's really hit me with some knowledge. I've learned a lot in this conversation so far. I've barely had to ask her any questions. It's been really interesting so far. And I want to encourage our listeners, if you want to share perspective, give a comment, ask a question, please do WhatsApp call or text us at 925-3261. Or you can call 949-6037, 949-8990, or 1-800-534-8255. Now, Anniki, if we're going to go to your district, what have you seen the approach from candidates to be so far in your district? What would you like to see more of or less of? Is it the same old rhetoric?
I am seeing a different tone in politics nationally, but of course I'm going to see it more closely in my district. I can walk to district meetings right there in my neighborhood. I'm going to focus on the district of Bordentown, not just my constituency of Bordentown West. In Bordentown, I am seeing a return of gentlemanly politics. Bordentown had a golden era of representation. And it was funny. It was the three Bordens, Haig, Jim, and Roy. And then Heather joined in. And then I remember there was Mr. Franklin Smith. Miss Mary Lawrence was always involved in Bordentown politics. And the Bordentown debate was always a very dignified experience with, don't get me wrong, they were spicy. Mm-hmm. But there was a certain amount of
decorum,
dignity, decorum, right?
Before, yeah.
And statesmanly presentation that showed up in Bordentown. And I'm starting to see, and so when I speak of Bordentown, I'm thinking Newlands, Savannah, Bordentown West, and Bordentown East, because to me that's Bordentown. And
Okay.
Of course, that's what the constituency was before. And you're starting to see, even in the debates, a certain amount of pride coming back. And I really, it's something I would like to see more of. Another thing that I'm thinking, I'm noticing, my prediction is going to be interesting. Like, it's mixed results of, incumbents and newcomers. I am also, and this is not just my district, but I'm noticing in my district there's some young people coming out, right? Boddentown North is another place where, not Boddentown North, West Bay North is another place where you're seeing a group of young people coming out, and I'm like, now we're talking, okay? So I love the mixed bag, because in the workforce, I have learned myself that if you're too heavy on one generation, you're going to have imbalance, right? And I'm just speaking from my professional experience, and then you can draw. I'm going to draw the parallel. In my professional experience, when all of your decision makers are boomers, you are going to have struggles when it comes to tech, because it takes them catching up with the understanding of the tech to make a decision about tech. So there's a lot of education. No, seriously, a lot of education around tech.
Yes,
and tech has hung businesses that I've come in contact with in the past few years, right? If you have too many young people, you start to see, if you too like Gen Z, then you start to see like Gen Z moves very, very quickly and not very thorough necessarily, because they have the energy for it. There is a lack of sticking power. Gen Z, they will spend 2 years in a job, go to the next job. Like, there's a different approach to even work that Gen Z brings to the table. Millennials, I feel like we spend a lot of time translating between the two.
Yes.
And I feel as though we are not the quiet Gen X. The Gen X is kind of like
I didn't think we were quiet. I thought we were a little revolutionary in a sense.
Are you Gen X?
I am an exennial as well.
Okay,
yeah.
no.
I'm 1980,
no.
so.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking like 1975.
Okay.
They're the ones that are pissed upset in the corner, and they're not. Ooh, am I gonna get? I'm so sorry.
You're good. Don't worry.
They're in the corner, like being like, they're complaining in the corner. They're not gonna do it publicly necessarily, right? Mm-hmm. But they work hard and they deliver, and don't mess with them, because if you mess with them, they'll come for you. But if you don't mess with them, they're just gonna complain in the corner. Whereas I feel like millennials were the first set that were like, this ain't working. This is not working. But we also saw everything break right before we got to it, right? So Gen X was able to buy a house before we got out into the world, right?
Right. And they're like, why can't you guys do it?
Well, what's wrong with you? You don't work hard enough.
It's no longer
right?
$2,000.
Mm-hmm,
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like $2 million.
And so there's a huge gap between Gen Z and a boomer. Mm-hmm. And now we see politics starting to reflect the full spectrum, and I'm starting to get excited about that, because no matter who wins, I think we what is important to notice is that the younger generations are not they are not going to be okay with you telling us what to do and how it should be. Like, they're not going to be okay taking orders, and that's a really beautiful thing. Like, we got some really young guys that are running this time, like in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I mean, good luck to them. I don't know how many of them are going to get through it. I feel like some of this is going to be a very, very good experience for a long-term future of success for some of them.
I agree.
But I would encourage them not to give up, even if they don't get in at this point. But I'm speaking nationally, but I'm super excited about the spectrum. I'm also super excited about the spectrum of experience in politics, right? And age and political experience are not the same thing. Like, some of the folks, some of the young people that we've seen coming out have grown up in politics. They know what they're getting into, probably more than the person who is a boomer who's joining for the first time, right? So there's that spectrum of political experience that I'm super excited to see, because I believe that there has to be a different answer from, oh, this is how we've always done things. And it has to come from the fresh perspective, the beginner's mind that's going to walk in the door, at the same time as there needs to be some form of experience in how government actually works. How government actually works is very, very different from the private sector. And it's been one of my hesitations to ever join government, to join the civil service, because of how accustomed I am to the private sector.
Do you think understanding governance and experience within it is a key factor to voting decisions as well? Like, do you think candidates should come with a little bit of that?
I'm looking at it from a higher perspective of like a bird's eye view on who I would want to see fill the House, like fill the Parliament, and I would want to see a mix.
Yeah.
You know, I would want to see a mix. I think how a voter is making a decision right now in my district, there are a couple of factors. One is, you know, if you have multiple candidates that you can't choose between, you're looking to see who you want to be premier.
Right.
Right? That's what I'm noticing in my constituency. I think that the experience thing is having an impact and will have an impact throughout. But I believe that, you know, where you have multiple really good options, you're really looking more, you move from the local to the national. Now, or in reverse, right? You look at the national, you choose who you want to be premier and say, does this guy fit the bill for me? Or does this lady fit the bill for me? And if they don't, then you're making that decision. One of the things I want to talk about, though.
Before we go there, the tricky thing is we're not voting for a premier. We're voting for a candidate. And it's the majority of the party that gets in, and they choose that the party leader is generally the person who will be premier. So it's, I think,
it's tricky, but I don't think I have a lot of respect for the Caymanian voter. I think they understand how their system works in a way that we don't give them enough credit for, right? And I think they make strategic decisions when they go to the ballot box. I would like to see more foresight in the voting booth. I'm going to say something that I you know, this is my pet peeve around elections, right? We have laws against buying votes. It is illegal. Not only is it illegal, it is a criminal offense. However, it is something that persists. And we're going to come into that.
We have to go to the 9 a.m. news, but you know, the question I want to leave to you that what hopefully we can return to is, what is buying votes disguised as?
Got it covered. This is going to be fun.
All right, let's go to the 9 a.m. headline news.
This is the People's Radio Station. Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands. From Radio Cayman's newsroom, this is Headlines. Local, regional, international news.
The headline news is brought to you by Kirk Market and Health Services Authority.
Candidate forums continue tonight. The Bodden Town East Chamber of Commerce Candidate Forum is taking place at 7:15 p.m. You can live stream it at Chamber's YouTube channel. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is meeting Norway's Prime Minister. The two are expected to speak to the media afterwards. Germany's outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz says Europe must continue backing Ukraine regardless of any U.S.-Russia talks as he heads to the EU summit. Meanwhile, top military leaders from about 20 countries are meeting in London as part of a UK and France coalition of willing. President Zelensky says Russia has shown the world their true attitude towards peace after Russian strikes killed 2 people in Ukraine. In Russia, an airfield is on fire in Saratov after overnight Ukrainian drone strikes, in which 10 people were injured, and a state of emergency was declared after multiple secondary explosions. Those are your headlines. I'm Karsley Fuller.
More news available at www.radiocayman.gov.ky. Check out our social media pages: Facebook, YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, Radio Cayman Headline News.
Looking for fresh, healthy food that's full of flavor? Then you've got to visit Kirk Market. Our dishes are made with fresh, high-quality ingredients. Enjoy vibrant mixed greens or satisfying pasta salads. Or try one of our delicious grill options like blackened chicken, spicy beef steak, or grilled salmon. Looking for something light and flavorful? We've got sushi rolls and poke bowls prepared daily. And don't forget to explore a hot bar or Billy Fresh salad at the salad bar. Stop by Kirk Market today for breakfast, lunch, or dinner and taste the difference. Eat well, live well with Kirk Market.
Do you have a healthcare question but not sure who to ask? Contact HSA's Patient Call Center to speak to one of our experienced clinical team members. We are here to answer your questions and help guide you through your healthcare journey. Need to make an appointment? Our team can help. Contact HSA at 949-8600 or email info@hsa.ky. At HSA, we are committed to caring for you.
The Buzz with your host, Kathy Miller.
Welcome back to The Buzz. We are having quite an in-depth and amazing discussion. I'm absolutely loving it. And I'm sitting here in studio with Anniki Hill. We're talking about the political landscape since nomination day, and the discussion is kind of taking its own course, which I love. I think it's the most natural way to have a discussion, just follow how the discussion's going. We did have a comment come in via WhatsApp, and I love this comment. So thank you for sharing with us. And that comment is absolutely phenomenal discussion. And they gave a heart emoji.
Oh, thanks.
So thank you to our listener. And again, if you want to join the discussion, send your comments or questions, you can do so via WhatsApp at 925-3261. You can call in at 949-6990 or 949-8037. You can also call in on WhatsApp, right? 925-3261 or 1-800-534-8255. As much as I say those numbers, sometimes I get them mixed
you're
up.
really good with them.
Sometimes I get them wrong.
I forget my birth date sometimes.
These are the only numbers of my mom that I know by heart.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So right before we took that break, you talked about how it is illegal to be buying votes. It's a criminal offense to do so. And I said right before we hit the headline news, we're going to come back to this question, which is, what is buying votes disguised at? And what's the impact of it?
So at last election, I had a family member show up and say to me that their representative would like to offer me a fence. Right? So that representative or whoever it was that they were voting for, their candidate, would love to put a fence in my front yard. I said, no, thank you very much. No. Because if they can buy you, they can sell you.
Ooh.
Now, that was a eye opener for me, but I've heard this before. And it was always a pet peeve for the election office that there was never really any reports of vote buying, but it was rampant, right? You could see it. And so what does vote buying look like? Vote buying looks like, you have a conversation with one candidate, and then somebody else in the party comes up and gives you something. Mm-hmm. You didn't ask for that candidate, but they sent someone else, right? Like that circle.
Yeah.
And then there's also that and you can actually it can be deniable, right? They do it in a very subtle way, but Caymanian politicians have been professionals at buying votes. I remember when I was growing up, my grandmother used to laugh at it because my grandmother was like, what like in the districts, back in those days, when you wanted to get elected, you go out and sat down at every matriarch's yard and spent some time with them. You had to, you're gonna eat their coffee cake or their luncheon cake and have a cup of coffee or whatever it was, and you're gonna talk with that mother. My grandmother was one of those mothers, and those conversations happened underneath the tamarind tree. And they would leave, and she would say, yeah, this one just offered me this, but us Baden Towners, we eat them out and vote them out.
Right.
Right? And you see, I feel like that sounds mercenary, but that's how it should be. Right? I'm not going to tell people who are in need not to take support. However, that shouldn't influence how you vote. I think that's what has put us in a position for decades of decisions that were not in the best interests of Caymanians, because there's no politician in Cayman whose salary can feed their entire constituency. If they're feeding you and they're feeding multiple people in your constituency, you have to stop and ask yourself the question, where is that money coming from?
Right.
And there was a time when politicians didn't have to do that. You know why? Because you had jobs.
Right.
You had jobs. You had you had people who were providing for themselves, and they were living their lives with dignity. They were proud of what they did. They might not like their job every day, but they didn't have to worry about food at the end of the week or their electricity bill.
Right, right.
So I always say it, if they can buy you, they can sell you. And so that's a thought. I mean, I'm not identifying.
I love this phrase.
If they can buy you, they can sell you. And if you give them permission to buy you, you give them permission to sell you. So my advice to the Cayman public, that they're going to do it. eat them out and vote them out.
I know that we're getting phone calls. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why the phone didn't get answered. I don't know what happened to our engineer in a sec. So hopefully that caller can call back. They'll come right back to you. I promise they'll be right back answering that phone. So whoever is calling, I see that phone flashing again. So if you are calling for the show, please hang on, call back again. We just had to run and take care of a quick little something. All right, we do have a caller online. Thank you for calling back. And good morning and welcome to The Buzz.
Yeah, morning. Some very, I think, wide and broad perspectives expressed here this morning, or being expressed on the political landscape of Cayman. And I think your guest, Anniki, is a political strategist, pundit, or what is the sort of background?
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't really introduce me in that way. I am not a political pundit, sir. I am. Well, first of all, thank you for your question, and thank you for the invitation to introduce myself properly. I am a born Caymanian. I was raised here. I was educated in the United Kingdom. I'm an attorney by education and a health insurance professional for the last 15 years. I've also been a Caymanian artist. Participating in multiple versions of the arts. I paint, and I also have written a book called Signs of Us, which is probably why I got this invitation. It's an exploration of the Caymanian identity in poetry. And in one of those poems in this book is called The Election Prayer. So this is one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I believe that the way that we approach politics is oftentimes a reflection of how we see our own identity.
All right. Well, it seems that you kind of viewed the, I wouldn't say the total political spectrum, but a good portion of it. And with the path that we have, that is, overall Cayman has followed over the last, let's say 20, maybe 30 years, and which most of those, I think you could say those decisions were based on political determination, or political thinkings. Yeah, had to be, because prior to that, there was a good coagulation, I think, between civil service and political. But and I don't know whether you've had a chance to just maybe overview the last auditor general report. And the way that we're moving. And you hear this touted quite a lot on many different forums and subjects. Well, if we don't do this, Caymanians are not going to have a job. Now, I believe that at this time there could be 65,000, maybe, might even be 70,000, let's say, overall jobs in the Cayman economy. I think, availability of, let's say, Caymanians, total meat and cornbread Caymanians, to fill those jobs probably don't number more than 35, 40,000. Maybe not that much. So, what, or do you have any views on the thinking against those kind of backgrounds?
I think what I understand your question, sir, is from your question. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to make sure I have the right question. So I understand that you're asking. We've made a lot of decisions and political decisions around the fact that there are not enough Caymanians to do all of the jobs that exist in Cayman. Right? Am I hearing you right? Okay, got it. So, this is going to be one of the major decisions that voters are going to need to make when they are choosing a candidate. I think it's a great question. It's a great question to pose to your candidates. How do you propose to support Cayman's employment and labor sector? How do you propose to make sure that Caymanians are not sidelined and that they are able to have jobs. It's a very challenging question. I have lots of opinions on it, but unfortunately for all of us, well, not unfortunately for me, I am not a candidate. And I shouldn't say unfortunate. I should really say fortunately for me, I'm not a candidate. I would not want to be sitting in any of their seats right now. I am very interested to see what those answers are. I know that the Chamber Forum and I also know the Radio Cayman's debates have featured these questions, right? You know, how are you going to get Caymanians back to work? You have Caymanians that are coming home who can't find work from university. I think it's a critical piece, but I think it also ties into a lot of other questions about development and housing, etc. You know, we don't want to get into that circumstance where I think you're seeing in other parts of the world where their cost of living is so high that they're actually moving whole departments of businesses overseas. Right? Because you cannot afford to pay someone to live in the jurisdiction where you are because of the cost of living. And with the changes that we see in technology, I believe we're going to have to make some very, very, very quick decisions about how Caymanian businesses can continue to survive with the cost of living and how we can keep Caymanians as in the forefront of the workforce. Those are things that we're going to have to consider, because if it's going to be more expensive to hire Caymanian than it is to hire somebody in the Philippines to do your design work or this project or that project, you're already seeing that happen. So, you know, it's all interrelated, but these are questions you need to ask your candidates.
I think you made a great point, and I want to say it's not just the businesses that are relocating. What I'm seeing when I'm speaking to millennial Caymanian families that are they're millennials, they're relocating their entire family because of the cost of living, and they can't afford to buy a house here. And that to me is the scariest. That was a slap in my face in understanding that, because I was like, okay, I know I've been here 20 years, but it really made me look like if Caymanians can't even live here and they're being kind of not ousted, but in a sense because of the cost of living and how hard it is to get property, what right do I have more than them?
Yeah.
And that's just a very real thought that I have. We got to go to a next commercial break, and when we come back, we have to wrap our conversation. I think we have another phone call, and I just want to give a quick special birthday greeting to Miss Linda Allen from her children and friends and KPMG staff.
Looking for fresh, healthy food that's full of flavor? Then you've got to visit Kirk Market. Our dishes are made with fresh, high-quality ingredients. Enjoy vibrant mixed greens or satisfying pasta salads. Or try one of our delicious grill options like blackened chicken, spicy beef steak, or grilled salmon. Looking for something light and flavorful? We've got sushi rolls and poke bowls prepared daily. And don't forget to explore a hot bar or Billy Fresh salad at the salad bar. Stop by Kirk Market today for breakfast, lunch, or dinner and taste the difference. Eat well, live well with Kirk Market.
The new KFC nuggets have arrived. That, unlike the no-gets, ours are handmade using 100% white meat, unlike the no-gets. At KFC, we hand-bread every day to achieve the perfect flavor. After you try our delicious and crispy nuggets in the original recipe, you'll never settle for less. KFC, the real nuggets. It's finger-licking good.
Take some advice from your Aunt Angie. Don't lie on your resume. Because if you say you've got trapeze experience, someone might shoot you out of a cannon and expect you to do a gymnast routine while flying through the air at 82 miles an hour. And just because you want to land on your feet doesn't mean you will. But if you're smart, you'll have CG medical insurance, so you get the best coverage for the price.
Get the best coverage for the price. CG Brit-K. Good like that. All benefits are subject to policy provisions, including eligibility at the time of service.
There's a new feel to Sundays that's coming soon.
If you like a bit of this,
or a bit of this,
or even a bit of this.
Then we've got just what you're looking for. I'm Sam Oakley.
And I'm Tarek Younusafana. Join us every Sunday at 3 for Classics on a Sunday.
Because classical music doesn't need to be boring.
The Buzz with your host, Kathy Miller.
Welcome back to The Buzz. I am your host, Kathy Miller, and in studio with me I have Caymanian entrepreneur Anniki, and we are talking about the political landscape, and we had a whole bunch of questions going into this, and we've only gotten to a few of them, which is amazing because that's just how good the conversation has gone on its own. We've had some people writing in. I've given some messages out. I know you've gotten some messages coming in as well. And just to go back to what the candidates are doing right now, what we're seeing, a lot of them make big giant promises that I'm like, okay, we can't just change the roads, guys. It's a whole planning, and it takes a long time to do. So when it comes to the realistic promises, what are you seeing out there? I guess, going to your district in particular as well, but then there's a lot of stuff being said on national level. What are you seeing, and what do you think voters should be looking for to separate the real solutions from the political rhetoric?
I think of a question that voters need to ask every single candidate is who's going to pay for that. There's a lot of promises that are wild, and I am coming from a background in health insurance, and some of the promises that are being made around healthcare and healthcare funding are wild. If you consider that there is a fear that the national health bill is going to bankrupt us as a country in the next 10 years, potentially, like that is a real fear. If you consider that health insurance trend, so what is health insurance trend? Health insurance, what we use to price health insurance, my background is in health insurance, is a inflation rate that we notice based on what the claims cost is per person, per member, per month, but over the course of the last year, and you see that increase. The current health insurance trend, which is how much we are paying for health care, not health insurance, health care, is 9% per year. Okay? That should freak all of us out. That should freak us all out. If we are now saying that we're shifting some of that cost to the government for a very large segment of our population, all children under the age of 16 or whatever it is, right? Who is going to pay for that? Let me tell you who's going to pay for that. If we're going to use the current structures that we have, all that means is that it's going to have to come out of a tax. We don't call it that, but it's a segregated insurance fund contribution that is attached to your premium bill. Today, every single person that pays health insurance premium is either paying, I think it's $15 per person and $20 for family. Or $20 for, if you're an individual, it's only like $10 and 20. I think it's 10 and 20. 10 and 20, right? That is what goes to fund the indigent. If now we are saying that we're adding the entire Cayman Islands population under the age of 18 to that indigent fund, and we're not going to call them indigent, we're going to call them something else. That means that your $10 and $20 on your premium is going to be looking more like 30, 40. Like that's a lot of money. It has to come from somewhere. And the way that it is currently funded is through the segregated insurance fund.
Okay.
So we're all paying for it anyway, is my point.
Yes.
That does not impact your cost of living. Where we need to be asking questions, someone's going to pay for it, and it's going to be us. It's either directly from our pockets, it's either in coordination with our employers, or the government's going to do it and then pull it back from us on a monthly basis through the segregated insurance fund. Where we need to be asking questions is how do we have a 9% inflation on medical care when we have capped fees that we pay on healthcare? The standard health insurance fees have not changed since 2015. And the reason they haven't been changed, they've been reviewed multiple times, but we do not have the data. There is no mandated financial reporting on the part of health care providers. if we don't have the data from the healthcare provider, we can't increase the fee, right? Nationally, right? If we can't increase the fees stay the same. They have been capped since 2015. How do we have a 9% increase on an annual basis?
A lot of questions to ask.
Those are questions we do not have answers to. And those are the questions that are going to make a difference. Because if not, we're going to end up in the same situation as traffic, which is that we're all going to end up in front of Hurleys and traffic anyway, no matter what road you put up east. Right? So there's a lot. These are my thoughts, right? Some of these promises are wild. You need to follow the money. You need to follow who benefits from this. You need to follow, like, why are you pushing this particular agenda for everyone? But healthcare, of course, is my wheelhouse. So I'll speak to that specifically. But my suggestion to every single voter is ask the question, why now? And who's going to pay for it? And that's for every single campaign promise.
Okay. You gave us a lot to think about right there with that answer. So a lot to digest, a lot to think about.
I could do 5 sessions on health insurance alone. Like, I spent 20 years.
I plan to have you back.
Not 20 years, 15 years in health insurance. Yeah.
We have a question that came via WhatsApp. And they said, this is a very great show, but what I would like for you to touch on is when the mentality that the older representatives, especially in West Bay, they have always put fear into their constituents that they, quote, know when they vote for them or not. End quote. So yes, the older folks saying to, quote, eat them out and vote them out, end quote, because no one can know who you cast your vote for except God.
I love that. That's exactly the truth. It's so true. They have no way of knowing. As a former, I was the returning officer for one of the districts, not last election, but the election before. I have been at the count for the majority of not the last one, but multiple elections before. From the time I was 17 years old, I've been counting votes. There is absolutely no way that somebody can tell who voted for them. You have your ballot, you put your X, no one can see, no one will know. The only way that they can that they will even think to come, like, to try and figure out who voted for them is because they sit down with the list, they sit down with the voters list. I'm learning this now on the other side, right? Like how candidates actually canvass. They look at the voters list. They look at who they expect to vote for them. If they don't expect those if their numbers don't match up, then they're like, who did it? So they're going to sit down and try and figure out who didn't vote for him.
Right.
But there is absolutely no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing. That is one of the reasons why I always big up the elections office. I'm so proud of that office. Like, Cayman's elections office is so efficient and effective and clear. And that is not something you ever have to worry about. I've seen it. I have counted votes. I have taken postal ballots. I have gone on mobile voting as an elections officer. And it is not something you ever have to worry about. They will come and come at you. But they shouldn't. That's not even a thing that should be allowed. I don't even know why that's not an offense. It should be an offense. Like, there's certain conduct around elections. This is such a sacred thing.
Yes.
People have died for our ability to vote.
Yes. Around the world, this happens. So when people use their vote as not really a big deal, or I'm not registered but have a lot to say, and I'm just, I'm aghast at it, really.
Yeah.
More than
they
anything.
have no way of knowing. You walk in there with a straight face, you put your X, and you walk by it with a straight face. Don't look at anybody in the face. They have nothing to read, nothing to know. You get to decide whether you tell somebody or not, and that's the only way they would know.
All right, so don't let fear motivate you or demotivate you into your voting process.
That is
we have another
such a
question.
ghetto way of dealing with things, like just intimidation tactics. Sorry. I have another pet peeve. I'm just going to put this out before you say the next question. I heard somebody recently use the word enforcer on a political stage. I almost died. Enforcer? What does that even mean? See, that kind of intimidation tactic, that is a dangerous thing we cannot allow in Cayman. That needs to stop. That is not us. That needs to stop.
I agree with you.
Sorry.
We only have a few minutes left. I do want you to cap on your book before we end the show. But before we get to that, the last question that came in is, it says, statistically, it's a 75% turnout on election day, a possible decadence in this current election day, gradually, obviously, a degeneration of vanquished, of overcoming a contest henceforth. Oh, I guess it's not really a question. It's more of a comment.
Okay, got it.
So that was the comment there. That's thank you for your comment. I know this guy. He got me a painting, so that's a fan of the Buzz as well. So I appreciate you tuning in and giving your statistics out here. All right, so you touched on your book a little earlier, but let us know about it once more, and I'm excited because I get to leave with a copy.
Oh, yeah, this is yours. So Signs of Us, an exploration of Caymanian identity in poetry. I've written this over the course of 20 years. I was writing in my journal. I've always written poetry from the time I was about 8 years old, probably younger even, and always had a journal. And in my journal, I wrote all these poems. And at one point in time, I was asked to present something. It was at the Roy Bodden Symposium, the first one. And I went back and looked at all my writings. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have like about 3 or 4 books worth of poetry in here. So I decided to put this together. And one of the things that I think is a major theme of this book is the relationship that we have with the land and how development has impacted the Caymanian identity, and how the Caymanian identity is so closely tied to our relationship with land and sea, natural, tangible Cayman, natural cultural heritage. And it is having such a sense of displacement. So not only are we feeling like we're our overpopulated country is in a place of like feeling outnumbered, but on top of it, we don't have access to the things that were how we survived in the past, right? So there's a piece here that I have that I'd like to just read a piece of a poem. I can't read the whole poem because I get run off of Radio Cayman.
Okay.
I cuss a little bit in this book, so
okay. Got to keep that cussing off.
Yeah, I can't do that. No, and I already slipped-ish. So some would call it grief, but these angry cycles do not stop with each fresh betrayal. Each new wet signature, notarized, land register mortgaged, modified, selling ground to pay for provisions, light, shelter, water, as if we were not the sons and daughters of Abel. But we are less able with each kiss-sealed betrayal, every day more abandoned. And that is a feeling that I think that we are going to see across the board. And, Caymanians are going to respond to that grief. I don't know a single Caymanian who is not grieving. Who's not grieving a tree, who's not grieving an access to a beach, who's not grieving their family land, who's not grieving something to do with what was our physical heritage. And I am mindful that we all respond to it differently, right? So my family member that I mentioned, he's going to vote for whoever puts a spare gun back in his hand, because that is a symbol for him of what that means to be Caymanian. And I get it. I disagree with him, but I get it. But my response to that is going to be like focusing on protecting access to education and success and jobs and so on. But I think that grief is going to drive this election.
Ooh.
Grief is going to drive this election, and it's going to have Caymanians making choices that will preserve our identity and put us in a position where we know that we have a future, even though we feel helpless in the present.
And that's a great way for us to end the show. If people want to get this book, where can we pick it up?
The book is Signs of Us, and it's accessible. You can buy it at the Book Nook or at Next Chapter. It's also on Kindle. I am working on getting it recorded at some point. Excellent. I'm going to have a lot of fun with that. But yeah, and I welcome comments. If Caymanians, you know how to find me. I'm on Instagram at Anniki Hill Writes. And at Anniki Paints. You can find me on Instagram. If you actually have a copy of the book and you want me to sign it, I'll meet you at the bookstore, or I'll meet you at Café del Sol, and I'll write a message in the book for you, because this is a love song to my people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm not letting you go. You'll be back on the show with me quite often, I hope. So thank you so much for joining me this morning and having this conversation. It was a really important one. It was a great one, and you have left us with many things to think about.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Everybody have a wonderful Thursday, and I'll be back with you next week on The Buzz.
The Buzz is proudly sponsored by Cayman Insurance Center, specializing in property, life, and other lines of insurance products and services. And Kirk Market. Experience a world of choice. And by Yum. Daily school lunch menus are available to browse on the